Welcome to This Explainer. If you're gearing up for a literature class review on modernism, you are definitely in the right place. Today, we're jumping straight into one of the most incredible, complex, and honestly, unjustly neglected works of the 20th century. We're talking about Dorothy Richardson's massive 13-volume magnum opus, Pilgrimage. We're going to decode the revolutionary style of this book sequence, because this is a style that literally reshaped modern literature as we know it. So, if you were to ask almost any literature student who pioneered the stream of consciousness narrative technique, they're probably going to say James Joyce or Virginia Woolf. Am I right? But the historical truth here is actually far more surprising. Before we get into the heavy analysis of her text, we really need to correct the timeline of literary history. Today's study guide decodes this challenging text. We'll explore her historical impact as a forgotten pioneer, the autobiographical roots, her restrictive subjective lens, how to decode her unique punctuation, and finally unpack her feminist and philosophical themes. Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. The Forgotten Pioneer, before Joyce and Woolf. Let's look at exactly why Dorothy Richardson was initially lumped in with and then completely overshadowed by her famous contemporaries. Just look at the timeline here. Richardson actually completed the very first volume of Pilgrimage, which is titled Pointed Roofs, in early 1913. This makes her a true trailblazer for the modernist narrative style. I mean, to put that into perspective, James Joyce's portrait of the artist as a young man wasn't even serialized until 1914. So Richardson was out there pushing the boundaries of continuous, internal psychological narrative well before Joyce and Woolf became household names. And here's a funny detail. When the critic May Sinclair reviewed Pointed Roofs in 1918, she borrowed a phrase from psychology and coined the literary term stream of consciousness just to describe Richardson's style. But the irony? Richardson herself absolutely hated the label. She rejected it as total nonsense, saying it stood isolated by its perfect imbecility. But, the media ran with it anyway, and the genre was officially born. All right, Section 2, Art Imitating Real Life, the Roman Haute Clef. To really understand the protagonist of Pilgrimage, Miriam Henderson, and how she develops throughout all 13 volumes, we have to look closely at Richardson's own life. So Pilgrimage is what we call a roman en clef, which basically means it's a novel where real people or events appear under invented names. The entire series is deeply anchored in Richardson's real experiences. For example, Miriam's time teaching in Germany in Pointed Roofs directly mirrors Dorothy's own desperate need to work after her father's financial ruin. And later on, Miriam becomes a Harley Street dental secretary, which perfectly reflects Richardson's grueling working-class reality in London. But this is absolutely crucial for your character analysis. Real-life tragedies directly shaped these novels. The heartbreaking suicide of Richardson's mother in 1895 is depicted in the volume Honeycomb, and that profound trauma fundamentally altered the trajectory of the whole series, really deepening the psychological intensity of Miriam's internal world. Which brings us to Section 3, the subjective lens, a single point of view. If you've tried reading Pilgrimage, you know it can feel intensely introspective and, honestly, pretty challenging for new readers. Let's explore exactly why her narrative choices cause this. The biggest hurdle is her unswerving adherence to a single point of view. Richardson locks us entirely inside Miriam's head. Unlike those traditional 19th century novels, there is no helpful, omniscient narrator here to spoon-feed us background exposition. And that severely limits our access to objective background information. For instance, we only learn about Miriam's family going totally bankrupt when Miriam herself actively thinks about it mid-journey on a train. Basically, if Miriam isn't actively thinking about it, we literally just don't know about it. To put this in a bit of literary context, let's contrast Richardson's approach with Henry James. Now, Henry James is famous for developing the single point of view narrative technique. But while Richardson inherited this idea from James, she cranked it way up. She intensified it drastically. Where James maintained a nicely structured plot right alongside his psychological realism, Richardson just abandoned traditional plot structures almost completely. She traded objective reality for a purely psychological one, forcing us to navigate the world exclusively through Miriam's immediate, unfiltered perceptions. Moving to Section 4, Decoding the Mind, a guide to experimental style. Because she strips away that traditional plot, we kinda need a decoder ring to read her specific stylistic quirks without getting totally frustrated.
Richardson pulls off this psychological reality through her absolute mastery of free and direct speech. It's a technique that just blurs the line between the third-person narrator and the character's first-person thoughts. It lets the narrative voice blend seamlessly into Miriam's wandering mind. It totally abandons linear timelines to capture associative thought patterns instantly. So we're basically reading momentary impressions exactly as they happen. And sure, that drastically limits our objective view of events, but it vastly expands how well we understand Miriam's inner emotional life.
And a huge visual marker of this wandering mind is her unique punctuation. When you're reading and you hit her famous experimental ellipses, like suddenly jumping from tying a Greek knot to reading Ruskin, don't just rush past it. Think of this as an insider's pro tip. Just follow these 3 steps. 1. Notice the break. It represents a literal physical pause in Miriam's attention. 2. Track the associative thought. Ask yourself, wait, how did her mind leap from a dress pattern over to an art critic? And 3. Re-enter the narrative scene once her attention snaps back to the room. If you use this method, it turns a really confusing text into a fascinating map of human cognition. And finally, Section 5, Philosophy and Feminism, the New Woman. Because as Miriam Henderson matures over the decades covered in the books, the intellectual weight of the text matures right along with her. It transforms into this deep, deep exploration of both philosophy and female independence.
By the time we hit the 6th volume, titled Deadlock, Miriam's wandering mind is rigorously tackling some major philosophical theories. And Richardson isn't just name-dropping here. She is weaving these dense ideas directly into Miriam's consciousness. We see Miriam attending lectures on British idealist John Ellis MacTaggart and vigorously debating the merits of Spinoza, Emerson, and Nietzsche with her fellow lodgers. It perfectly demonstrates how Richardson's stream of consciousness isn't just about fleeting sensory details, right? It is a serious vehicle for heavy, sustained intellectual inquiry. And all of this intellectual awakening fuels her very specific brand of feminism. Miriam flat out rejects traditional male narratives. She has this great line where she complains that men's books go bang, bang, bang like a tram, aggressively driving a plot forward but leaving out the authentic modern female experience. Richardson firmly believed that only a radically new, unstructured, subjective form of the novel could actually capture the true reality of a woman's life. It was about freeing the novel from the demands and values of male authors, like H.G. Wells, who, by the way, frequently tried to mentor and, frankly, control her.
Now, despite this absolutely monumental literary achievement, Dorothy Richardson was desperately poor her entire life and died in relative obscurity back in 1957. But today, thankfully, her legacy is secure. Her extensive archives, her letters, her manuscripts, they're all meticulously preserved at the Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library. Scholars are finally returning to her work, giving her the recognition she has always deserved as a true titan of modernist literature, one who literally built the foundation that others stood upon. So what should you really take away from all this? As you prepare for your literature review and open the pages of Pilgrimage for yourself, I want to leave you with this provocative thought. If traditional novels gave us this neat, objective truth dictated by some all-knowing narrator, how does Richardson's intensely subjective, restricted and wandering lens alter what we even accept as the truth in fiction? Is a character's flawed, fragmented internal stream actually closer to the reality of the human experience? Keep that in mind as you read. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and enjoy your deep dive into the mind of Miriam Henderson.